Well, hello again, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for roll call. And for our regular audience, welcome back. Fired up that you're back here. Appreciate you so much. For everybody that's new to roll call this week, welcome. This is the forum where we dig deeper into the principles that our team introduced to you by way of our keynotes, breakout sessions, our workshops, and the Top Gun Teamwork Program. And if I have not yet met you, my name is Robert Teschner, call sign Cujo, founder and CEO here at Team VMEX Group, and I'm fired up about this week's reflection. It's an important one. It builds on other reflections in the roll call series, and it's really centered upon your leadership style, with the major question being who's setting your standards. And this is a really important question that we have to confront. All of us do. And it's not just formal leaders that I'm talking to right now. I'm also talking to the informal leaders that really influence the way that a team functions. Who's setting your standards? And it's an important reflection because I find oftentimes in an organization, and we see this all the time from the companies that we've worked with, a lot of the time we just don't have codified standards. So our norms are sort of rules of thumb, words of mouth. It's not something that we can point to and say, well, just like we said in onboarding, on page 13 of the standards document, this is the expectation. We don't have it codified that way. And that's ultimately a problem. In fact, just this week I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine who was lamenting the fact that certain members of the team always show up late. In fact, probably the standard has become that now everybody shows up late. And there's an apology, I had the thing or whatever, but we just never start on, the expectation now is we're not starting on time. And I asked him, okay, it's frustrating. What is the cost of violating this standard? And the answer is, well, nothing. Nothing ever happens. We just continue to move on. I'm like, where is that standard documented? This, hey, expectation is we start on time. And his answer was, well, we don't have it documented. So it makes it hard, really, to enforce something that doesn't exist, right? But it's still frustrating. And the problem is that if we haven't documented anything, it's really hard to practice accountability for it. So that's an issue. And if we haven't documented anything, then who's setting the standard? And it's actually a derogatory term. Like when you hear people say, well, the lowest common denominator is Nancy or Mark or Brian, whatever. That's not a nice way of referring to somebody. But if you think about it, if you've got a team member who routinely shows up late, doesn't do what's expected, isn't responsive, kind of has a salty attitude or whatever, and it's acceptable, then ultimately that becomes part of the norm here. And we're resetting expectations. If this person can get away with it, then I suppose everybody can. Because if there is no standard and now we're just having to adapt ourselves to this person's theory of life and practice of work, then ta-da, you have a new informal rule of thumb, word of mouth standard that's affecting the way that the team performs. And when those habits aren't healthy, that's a big time leadership problem, because ultimately, the takeaway is you got frustrated teammates. The folks who really care, they're upset. Maybe, though, they feel like they can't voice their dissent or their frustration or their whatever it is that they're thinking about over here. And so they spend their idle time thinking about where they could go next. Not a good place to be. So I come back to and say, hey, who's setting the standard around here? Is it the leader? Is it the leader that's saying, all right, we're in it to perform and to win. And in order to do so, we have to behave a certain way. We have to do certain things. We have to do business in accordance with basic fundamental rules. And when a leader doesn't take the time, when the leader justifies being too busy as a reason for why we don't have these things, when a leader feels like that would be too harsh or too critical or too, then they're allowing whoever it is that's performing least effectively to set the standard, which is a really bad way of doing it. I think right now, today, there's a lot of fear in the world. Fear of upsetting people, fear of being seen as not nice enough, fear of somebody walking or leaving, fear of the consequences of not having enough people, fear of what are we going to do if, and so leaders are kind of throttling back on leadership. They're tolerating more than they otherwise might have in the past, and it's not healthy. At the macro level, it's not healthy. It doesn't get us to performance. Performance is driven by a set of standards. Really, performance is tied to having a mission orientation that says we are going to overcome no matter what, which is the centerpiece of what we've been teaching for years here. We got to have a tactical mission orientation that everybody subscribes to, that everybody's bought into, a shared mission that everybody wants to see through to completion and will give their all to achieve. And the naysayers out there believe that you can't do this in business because it's not life or death. Oh, don't get me restarted on that one, okay? That's a huge self-limiting belief, and we aren't into self-limiting beliefs over here. But I will tell you that an enabler of mission success is knowing what the standard of performance is. That's the thing that we're going to measure ourselves against. And there's a consequence to not achieving the performance standard. Consequence could be as severe as you're no longer on the team. And it's a leadership deficiency when we tolerate people that aren't meeting the non-existent standard and we allow them to continue to be here. I would imagine that most of the people watching this roll call reflection are not part of some sort of a work program, right? Like your company is not in existence to provide people jobs. Your company does something. You've got a product or service that you're out there providing to the community. And you're doing so because you're a for-profit enterprise in most cases that's trying to win. Okay, so if that's your orientation, you know that the teams that really win out there, they're about performance and they've got standards of performance against which they measure. And that's just how it is. And it needs to be that way. And when people don't perform, they're out. And if you're tolerating a non-performer on your team, that's your fault. Good. And this is, why do we do this to ourselves every Friday? Really, it's just to kind of reorient, recage the brain, make sure that we're leading the way that we need to, the way that we want to, maybe the way that our teammates need us to. They need to know what the standard of performance is. They need to know what it's going to take from them to meet or exceed in order to drive performance, in order to achieve mission success. And if they don't have that clarity, that's on you. So what are we going to do about it? And that's on us. This weekend, to spend some time thinking about how it is that we're going to lead better moving into next week. And it might be that we're going to go back to and revisit the imperative of having standards, enforcing standards, using standards to drive performance and to build teams that win. And if that's the takeaway from today, what a great reflection. And know that as we continue to navigate leadership in a disruptive environment, all of us here at VMAX Group are rooting for you. Formal leaders and informal leaders and teammates who aspire to be leaders, and everybody else that's paying attention every week. We are so happy that you're here and we want you to win. And so keep on winning. And I personally look forward to speaking to you again next Friday.